Good morning, afternoon, and hello. Welcome to our webinar, The Workforce Blueprint, Attract, Engage, and Retain. My name is Max Smith. I'm the marketing manager for, I didn't even start yet. My name is Max Smith. I'm a marketing manager for 501c Services. We're on a 100% employee-owned company. We provide alternatives to state-run unemployment insurance programs. We provide services to more than 1,500 nonprofits nationally. As many of you all know, we're the administrators of the 501c Agencies Trust. We also operate a program for the Boy Scouts of America and a new insurance program called You Insure, which is a first dollar unemployment insurance program. A lot of you on today's webcast work with us already, and we appreciate you doing that and hope you will continue to do that in the future. I have a bit of housekeeping before we hand this presentation over to Jenna this morning. Please shoot us your questions in the questions tab as we go. We will answer most of those questions at the end. Jenna's going to go ahead and present, and then she's going to answer questions at the end. So shoot us the questions as we go, and we'll get to everybody at the end as time allows. A copy of today's materials are in the GoToMeeting control panel right now. If you go to handouts, Jenna has provided you with a PDF of today's program and some notes. A copy of that will also be emailed to everybody later today. So you have it right there in your control panel, and you'll get another copy later today. So you can download that now and follow along or make notes, as I know many of you like to. As you all know, we have recertification for today's program through HRCI and SHRM. We also have CAE available. In order for me to shoot you all those credits, remember you do need to create or complete the post-conference or the post-event survey. When we close the event today, it will pop up on your screen. If you don't have time to hang around to complete it then and there, it's only 12 questions. It will also be emailed to everybody who's on the call now later today. So just complete the survey. I think the last question in there, I ask you, which recertification credits do you need? Just check the ones you need, and I will shoot them over to you most likely tomorrow before I leave for the week. Also, we'll be back again next month, as usual. We have a pretty interesting session tomorrow, next month, about artificial intelligence and how that growing sector is influencing nonprofits and what nonprofits can do with that new technology. So we do have an expert, a firm on the call next month who will talk all about how nonprofits can utilize the new artificial intelligence technology for fundraising, HR, all kinds of stuff. So that'll be really interesting. Hopefully it won't be over our heads, but I've asked them to talk in layman's terms for us. All right, and now I'm going to turn our presentation over to Jenna. She's a general counsel with Cascade Employers Association. She's a great speaker. And I was talking to her today. She reminded me she's a lawyer that specializes in human resources, which is amazing that that kind of thing actually exists. So she's super cool, and she will be taking over the presentation right now, as I've just given you control, Jenna.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me this morning. And so we're going to be talking about some of the challenges in today's environment, about what it really takes to attract a good workforce, what it takes to engage them and retain them. Because what we know is that it's a big challenge. It is an employee's market out there. There's a lot of competition for not a ton of people. And so our goal today is to kind of go, what's the environment that we are in? What are some things that you can do to help improve the number of candidates that you're getting, improve your process, and so hopefully that from the beginning you're hiring someone who's more engaged, which ultimately means hopefully they'll be a more loyal employee, and then we'll shift to, once we have them, what do we do to engage and retain them, and what are some things that you can do. So let's see here. I'll Oops, this is not going to the right spot. So already experiencing some technical difficulties here. So let me do one more thing here. Hold on, sorry for this. Not sure why it is doing this. Okay, there we go. So now we're going to look at some basic trends in the workplace. So what we know is that we do have pretty low unemployment. So as I mentioned, that results in that there's a lot of competition and not a lot of people out there. And a lot of times the people that are out there that are unemployed are not your top candidates. Your top candidates probably have jobs right now, and they may not even might not actively be looking for employment. So there's a good chunk of maybe passive candidates who are like, I'm willing to have a conversation, but a lot of them are actually happily employed. And so that limits, in some respects, the people that we might be going after. But we also might want to look at our strategy if that's what we know. We also know that there is annual job growth in a lot of different sectors right now. And so you can see that we're seeing this annual job growth. Manufacturing is one that is probably the anomaly there. In manufacturing, we see increased output, but we're actually seeing less job growth in that particular sector, and that is primarily due to automation of processes. So that's sort of the outlier in terms of the job growth. But I know many states are experiencing record low unemployment. Oregon, which is where I am, happens to be one of those, and there are several other states that are also experiencing that. Another thing that's affecting our environment is that it is a hyperactive environment. And this really impacts not only your recruiting strategy and how do we attract people, but also in your retention strategy. It's fast paced, meaning people, they want to be connected with right away. They don't want to have to wait if they have applied for a job. They like it to be an interactive process. They want it to be easy, so it's reliant on technology. People don't like have to fill out paper applications. They want to be able to do it on online from your website or even from their phone or their tablet. And it's a very socially connected environment. It's a huge driver that we have right now. And so when we look at our strategies, we want to look at all of the different ways that we are connecting and how are we connecting with people in this very social environment, and what methods are we using. And some of it is to create a fan base for our organization before someone is even looking for a job, before they even have a need. So we're trying to really build that pipeline. So part of this hyperactive environment leads to a problem that we have in terms of sort of the retention side of things, is that we're always connected. People will sit at their couch in the evenings and grab their phone and start scrolling through some emails, clearing things out. People do it while they're on vacation, and whether that's an actual expectation that's been given to them or maybe just a habit out of ease, what it can cause is that burnout for people. Early to work, working later, always connected, and that can impact retention, but productivity, performance, all of those things we're seeing in the workplace because of that constant connection. So when we switch sort of to the retention side of things, that's definitely an issue that we want to look out, because it is impacting our ability to retain employees and sort of managing those expectations. And what we know is that companies with engaged employees outperform others by 202%. So it's not just making sure that we have employees, that we're hiring employees that are more likely to be engaged. It's we want to keep them engaged. And there's some really positive benefits that we see that happen when we have an engaged workforce. And so what we look at, and sort of what do we look at in terms of employee engagement. And I like this definition of engagement. I'm sure lots of you have had conversations about employee engagement. And sometimes those conversations are things like, well, we have to have happy employees. And you just say, well, that's not enough. You can't just have a happy employee, right? You could have someone who, sits at their desk and they shop Amazon all day and they're like, this is great, this is fun, right? But they're really not contributing at a high level. So they might have very high job satisfaction, but low job contribution. And what we're really looking at in terms of engagement is the maximum alignment of both of those. We want them to have high job satisfaction and high job contribution. So we've got to be able to meet both of those needs. And so if we can identify before we even hire someone, if they are more engaged, then we're more likely to retain them in the long run. But we have to make sure that we also have good employment practices to retain that engaged employee. So when we look at, and this is from the Gallup's organization that sort of breaks it down into these different categories of engaged employees. So on average, this is a national average, about 30% of employees are considered engaged. So these are your employees that work with a lot of enthusiasm. They're more resilient. They have consistently great days. They are more supportive of others when there are times of change. They have the ability to sort of see that organizational perspective, not just what's happening in their job. So they are more working with more energy, more enthusiasm, versus the partially engaged employees. So sometimes I say the partially engaged employees are sort of retired on the job, right? They're going through the day, they're doing what they're supposed to do, but they're not really exceeding any expectations. They might have some great days, but not those consistent great days. And so they're just kind of going through the motions. And so that's your most at-risk group because they're almost engaged, but they're almost disengaged. And then we have the disengaged employees. So the disengaged employees, about 18% of employees, and these are employees that often you can physically see it on them, as you can with engaged employees as well. They might be acting on their unhappiness. They might be high performers as well, but they're just disconnected. They're in the wrong position. They really don't see that organizational commitment. So sometimes they can be a challenge because you get sort of sometimes this attitude of like, well, I'm such a high performer. What are you going to do without me? And that can be a particular challenge for employers. But, when we look at these different categories in terms of retaining employees, I always ask this question of groups of where do you spend most of your time? With what group are you spending most of your time? And what we find is it's those disengaged employees that soak up a lot of our time and energy. And I think it's wasted time. You have to have a strategy to deal with them, but that shouldn't get the bulk of your attention. It's really those engaged and partially engaged employees that we want to focus our time and our efforts into. And I also just mentioned the mistake that I see a lot of organizations make with those engaged employees. We look at those engaged employees and we say, gosh, they're doing a great job. They're performing so well. They're consistently meeting my expectations, exceeding them. So I'm just going to be hands off. I'm just going to let them go. They're a rock star. And we forget about what they need as an employee. So don't make the mistake of ignoring your engaged employees. If you ignore them and don't give them the things that are most likely to retain them, feedback, recognition, they don't see accountability. If we don't give them those things, they will leave. And right now in today's environment, it is those engaged employees that are your most sought after employees, right? And those partially engaged, we got to give them some time to make sure they pop up to that engaged level and not down to that disengaged level. And why does it matter that we talk about engagement anyways? Is that we know that there's a real bottom line benefit. And so I take a look at this list and I go, gosh, who doesn't want these things? This is your wish list. I would love to have better productivity, profitability, customer satisfaction, and lower turnover. And so what we know is that when organizations really focus on engagement, that they're able to have a lot higher results. And so, when you look at this, just kind of go, yeah, this is something that I think we all want to strive for. And so we look at those statistics, 30, 50, 30, 52, 18. That's just the average. We want to be better than that. So hopefully today we'll give you some strategies about how we can exceed some of those expectations, starting with how do we find and attract these people? Because like I said at the beginning, that's one of the most important parts is finding them, and what strategies should we be looking at. So one of the things that we want to look at is really investing in your brand. And so we want to look at how many of you are active in the social media sphere, that you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, that you have a really high performing website. You're actually putting content on there and connecting with your followers on a regular basis. So a lot of times what I hear, I just was doing a similar session last week, and we were talking about this from the recruiting standpoint, and the group, and I said, how many of you are on Facebook and those types of things? We had a lot of hands, and I said, okay, well, how active are you? Like, how are you using it? And there were comments of, we put something up there maybe once a week, or if we have a job posting. I said, that's not enough, because people aren't thinking of you on a regular basis. And so you're probably not popping up into their feeds very often, but they're not looking at you as a good source of information or a resource for them. So really looking at getting social and connected on a regular basis is going to be worth your investment. Getting more visual with things. We know we're a very visual society as well. And so the more that we can create sort of those visual interactions through YouTube videos or Facebook Live, Periscope on Twitter, all of those sorts of things, again, create opportunities for us to connect with potential candidates, because people are very relationship oriented. And I think this is actually a huge advantage that nonprofits have, is that mission. Being mission driven, you tend to attract people that are more driven and attracted to your mission. And so we really have an opportunity in the nonprofit sector to maximize that really through social media and show some amazing things that you're doing, but you have to be doing it regularly. You have to have that presence so that people are coming back to your links, to your sites, and really seeking out the information rather than you always having to, sort of that push-pull relationship. Another thing that you want to do is talk with your new hires. Talk with them about their experience. So when you hire someone, you might want to sit down and do an interview with them to say, okay, I want to talk about our hiring process. Where were you looking when you found our job? Were there other places that you were looking? What is it that made you decide to accept a position with us compared to others? And then what about the process did you like? And what about the process did you not like? If we can get that information, maybe we can spot some trends, and maybe we can also then figure out ways to change the process. Like, I didn't like that I had to wait for 5 days after my application before someone contacted me. All right, that's something that we want to pay attention to. Oh, I really loved that you sent me a lot of resources to learn about the company even before we interviewed. Great, we want to look at all of those things. So talking with your new hires is a really great way to do that. One-on-ones, you're going to get the best information, but I understand that's not always feasible. So you could also do online surveys that you launch to new hires to complete maybe within their first week of employment, so it's fresh on their mind. So again, looking at ways to connect, talk with new hires, showcase your culture, employment experience, benefits and growth opportunities. So part of that, we talked about being visual. One of the things that you can do is more visual things like video job descriptions, have interviews with employees, follow them around for a day, post that type of information as well, in addition to all of the amazing services that you provide. Show them what it's like to work there. You can post those again to all of your social media sites, your YouTube, whatever your platform is, so that people get that sort of that well-rounded knowledge about what it might be like to work with your organization. Post videos, be mobile friendly. This is another one that's really important. And so again, it has to do with sort of that hyperactive and how people are consuming information. So it's not enough to just be, to be able to apply online. We want to make sure that when people are looking at our website or they're looking for jobs, that they can actually do it through their phones, through tablets. So something that's easy for them to be able to sort of, wherever they are, whenever they happen to see that or they're so inspired to apply, that it's easy for them to do, that they don't have to go print out a paper application, scan it, however you want, however you want to do it. The more manual the process is, the more you're going to have a limited candidate pool. And then again, we want to look at quickly interacting with people, providing quick follow-up with people. So I mentioned in the last slide, right, that customer experience, that client experience is reflective of the employment experience. And so if it's taking you 5 days to get a response to someone, to connect with them after they've applied, that speaks a little to your culture. So, and you can do a lot of these, things for not a lot of investment. With the quality of phones and those sorts of things that we have right now, you can do some amazing high quality videos that you can easily, quickly put up onto your websites and really start interacting with your fans. So get creative. Also, when we look at your job postings, what I really like is a more customized approach to your job postings. It's easy to do a boilerplate posting, but you limit your candidate pool. So we want to get more creative. Things like results-based job postings that aren't just focused on essential duties and responsibilities. They're really focused on outcomes. And so really kind of getting into more of what drives what you're looking for in terms of what those sort of native drives that people have, as opposed to, can you accomplish these tasks? Of course, we have to include that information, but our job postings, I see a lot of really poorly written job postings that look like every other single one. And it's because it's easy. We don't have maybe the time to do something that's really customized, but we really want to relook at how we draft the job postings. And I think we talked about some of these other things already. Providing resources to learn about the company is a great way. So one of the things that I do when I'm hiring someone is before I have them in to do a panel interview, I will send them information to say, hey, here's a link about our company. Here's some links to the people that you're going to be meeting with. Here's a little video that this person put out. Here's some YouTube videos from our company. Might want to take a look at those before you meet with us, just so you can learn about a little bit about who we are, about the culture of our company. And we can definitely see the people who've taken the time to look at those. We'll hear it come out when we interview them versus the people who maybe just kind of quickly scanned about it. But it's really important because in that interview process, we want them to interview us just as much as we want to interview them. And that's a problem that I see with interviews, is that it's sort of a one-way street. We're just interviewing them. But we have to give them enough information so that they can make an informed decision about us as well as the decision that we're making about them. So a couple other things when you look at how should you be evaluating your process is getting that data and feedback. So conducting regular employee surveys, quick pulse surveys, stay interviews, engagement surveys, new candidate surveys. All of this information can help us structure and maybe or restructure how we recruit and hire people, but also what we're doing to retain people. Now is a really good time to audit your recruiting process. I know that we're doing this for a lot of organizations that we work with who are sort of in this really challenging environment, and challenging in that, again, as I mentioned, not a lot of candidates, having to look at going after those more passive candidates, those candidates that are happily employed, and sort of targeting them, but also very manual processes. So we see a lot of companies that are losing candidates because of that manual process. And so we have to work with them to how do we automate as much of this as we can, but also increase the connection that we have with people, make it more interactive and technologically advanced as well. So if we look at some of those things and go, okay, we want to focus on making sure that we're creating a fan base before we even have the need. We want to make sure that we have a customized job posting, that we're really getting social, that we're taking the time to interact with people. Then we want to look at, how do I know, once I get those candidates in the pool, how do I know if they're right for us and if we're right for them? And we want that match. So we want to look at a few things that you can do to help improve that side of things. So one of the things that we look at a lot of times that I see when people are interviewing, and I go work with people and I say, okay, let's kind of go through your interviewing process and let's go through your interviewing questions. So much of the focus is what I call on the briefcase. The briefcases are those knowledge, skills, and abilities that people have, right? The things that are on the resume, but not enough on sort of what are their native drives that they have. What is it really that makes this person tick? Like, this person, really wants to be in control of a situation. So if we're putting them in a situation where they don't have a lot of control, they're not going to succeed. It's going to be a big challenge for them. Or this person is really driven by social interaction. They need to be in an environment that is collaborative, where they're working with people, that they have a lot of opportunity for FaceTime with people. If I know that about someone in advance, I can better predict if they're going to be a success or if they're going to struggle, regardless of what's in that briefcase. It's kind of like looking at, all right, I can do accounting. I'm great at it, but I do not like it, because accounting requires me to be sitting in my office in front of my computer. There's not a lot of interaction with people, versus the work that I do now really makes me tick because I get that social interaction. I get to work with people. It's very collaborative. It's always talking with different people, different situations. So if I have that briefcase for accounting, but I'm going to be a terrible employee because it's going to be draining to me. So we really want to look at, in our hiring process, yes, they need to be able to meet those, what's in the briefcase. They've got to have those minimum skills, knowledge, and experience. Absolutely. But beyond that, as interviewers, we want to look at what are those natural drives and behaviors that we are after. And that really starts before you even begin the interviewing process, by talking with people to ask questions like, what is it that's going to make this person succeed? What are the things that are really critical beyond the job description? Right? This person has to have a love for data and analysis, right? And they're going to take a look at a complex report and be able to, distill it down into the critical pieces that we need to make a decision to move ahead. So we really have to analyze what those things are. And there's some formal ways that we can do that, which I'll talk about in a minute, but then there's those informal ways. Talk to people who are in the position currently, talk to managers, talk to people who work with that position. What is it that really has allowed that person that's in it to be successful or others to be successful? We want to look at why have others not been successful, right? Hey, the reason why this person wasn't successful was because this was a job that required them to sit behind that desk all day, and they didn't have that interaction, and they really needed to have that social interaction with people. And we hired them because they could do the tasks of the job. So along with that is really mastering some great interview questions, moving away from your stock library questions. Typically in the interview, you'll have maybe 5 or 6 questions that you ask any candidate and all the candidates, because maybe they're aligned with your core values or something like that. So for example, where I work, we have about 5 or 6 questions that we ask every candidate for every position, because they are directly connected to the values that we have as an organization. And then beyond that, we have really customized questions for each position based on what we know are sort of required behaviors, drives for success, beyond sort of the job description side of things. And even those we customize every time. We have some that we just have to tweak every time because maybe a manager has changed, or maybe the focus of the job has changed. So we want to identify those behaviors. So I like this sort of analysis of going on a road trip. So I'm sure most of you have gone on a road trip with someone. And if you're thinking about the road trip, maybe some of you want to be in the driver's seat, and right, you want to be in control, you want to be driving. And if we were to put that person who wants to be in the driver's seat in the back seat, guess what? None of us are going to have a good trip, because that person who wants to be in the driver's seat sitting in the back seat is going to feel trapped, and they're going to be telling whoever's driving what to do the whole time. And so we look at this the same thing in the workplace. We all have these needs, and these needs drive behaviors that we see. So if we can better understand what those needs are, then hopefully we can hire a more engaged person beyond the job description. So you've seen this probably little indicator. It says the predictive index. This is something that we use as a formal people analytics at Cascade as a way to identify what are those native drives that people have. And again, you don't have to use this formal approach. You can simply do it by really sitting down with people that are in the position, all those things that I mentioned, people who supervise, but asking those things about what beyond the job description is really required for success, and then formulating interview questions around that. So what the predictive index is doing is really using the science to be able to give us very valid data to say, this is what makes this person tick. This is what drives them. And then what we can do is use their individual profile and compare it to a job profile that's been created. So if we take a look at this example that we have here, we have Aaron, and we can see, and you look at these patterns, you can just eyeball it. They're not similar. And so just from the eyeball test, we go, these patterns don't look alike, so something must be off. And if that's what you're thinking, you're right, because what we look at, and they're kind of tough to see, but if we see the letter that is farthest to the right on the top for the HR benefits, it says a little D. And then if we look at Erin's, her D on the bottom is way off to the left. And what that just means is that we need someone in this position who is detail-oriented, who likes rules, who likes that structure. But what we look at Erin is, Erin looks at it and goes, rules are guidelines. We'll leave the details to someone else. So what we can tell is by that science to go, Erin might have the briefcase. She might be able to do the tasks, but there are going to be a lot of this job is going to be draining and a struggle for her because that's just not how she's driven. So again, this is a formal way of looking at it, but using that science can really help you improve your hires to go, okay, we want someone that really has this profile at the top that we're looking at, that HR benefits, so we can hire around that profile. So again, you can use something formal or you can use that more informal approach, but then you need to make sure you're training yourself on what to listen for in that interviewing process. So assess your interview process. We talked about this a little bit already, so I don't know that we need to spend a whole lot of time on it. The one thing that I will mention that I see a lot of companies making mistakes, and this is feedback that I get, is they'll hire someone and you're like, gosh, they did so great in the interview and they could describe all of these things that they could do really well, but then I got them in the job and they can't do it. So what I would say, and where I see a lot of companies make that mistake, is you probably haven't done a good enough job in your interviewing process. Probably a time to evaluate what you're doing. So adding things like mock scenarios and situations can really help improve and be able to force someone to demonstrate that they actually have those skills, not that they just say that they do. So I always am building in scenarios and situations into our interview process. And for each one of you, you'd have to figure out what that might be. So for example, I worked with a car dealership and they were really struggling with their detail department. And they said, man, these people, they interview and they can describe in great detail how they would actually detail a car. And then we get them here and they're terrible and they can't do it. So I talked to them. I said, well, what do you do in the interview process? How do you make them show that they can actually detail a car? And they said, well, we just ask them about it. I said, okay, well, you're a car dealership. So you got some extra cars laying around? They said, yeah. I said, okay, well, in the interview process, have them detail a car. Now, it can't be a car that anyone's going to benefit one. So it can't go to a customer. It can't go out, to anyone. It's because then there would be wage and hour issues that we would be concerned about because they'd be performing work that the company's benefiting from. But let's just have this car that is your detail car. So part of your interview process is that they need to detail this car. And since the company's not benefiting from it, that can just be incorporated into part of your interview process. Once they started to incorporate that, some real hands-on scenarios their turnover in the department greatly decreased. So it was a really good piece there. So now we go, okay, I've gone through all of this work and I found the person that I, not only has that briefcase, they've got the head and heart that we're looking for as well. We know what their drives are. So we've got someone who's more likely to be engaged. So what we want to do is immediately engage them. So things that we do, because we don't want to spend all of this time, right, investing in this person, and we've taken the time to really make sure that they've got the briefcase and they've got the right drives, to then fail them once they start. So we want to make sure that we are able then to retain them and engage them through the process. So right from the hire, we want to make sure that they have clear goals and expectations. They've got the proper training tools and resources. That they've got a go-to person, and that go-to person shouldn't be their boss. They should have someone else who can sort of be that mentor role, or here's the person who can really show you the ropes around here. Another great thing to do is give them time outside of their functional area, because what we know is that if employees have a better organizational perspective and understanding how their job impacts all of the other jobs in the organization, they're much more likely to be engaged because they have that organizational perspective. So something that we do when we hire is we have people that meet with, we're a fairly small staff. We have, I think, 15 or 16 people. But we have them spend time with every single person on staff, and then we schedule them time with people in their own functional areas. If they're going out with meetings or different training events, we have new staff spend time with them so that they can understand not only how their position interacts with that and impacts that, but also to see a better understanding of what we do as an organization. So we want to make sure that we're immediately engaging them and then looking at what are we doing to retain them. What we know, these are the top drivers of engagement. What in most engaged employees, we look at that they have confidence in leadership, that they feel that the company values them, and they have a positive outlook on the future. So what is it that allows them to have those that confidence and that trust and that positive outlook? So we want to look at those three things: relationships, meaningful work, and strengths and native drive. So the first thing that we want to look at meaningful work, there's a lot of different things that go into this particular piece. And a lot of times it breaks down into the impact, growth, rewards, and recognition. So in terms of impact, we want to make sure that employees have a clear understanding of the business goals and how their work contributes. That's what I was just talking about. Infusion of the mission and purpose on a regular basis. One of the things that I think is great about nonprofits that you just don't see in the for-profit sector is that mission is so front and center, and it's easy for people to connect with. And what we actually find is that a lot of employees in the nonprofit sector are more engaged because of that, right? I always sometimes do a demonstration and I'll say, how long does it take me to find this organization's mission? And I'll jump on their website and I can usually find it really quickly. And then I'll jump over and I'll say, someone give me a for-profit company and let's see how long it takes us, to find their mission. And, I spent 20 minutes. I didn't do this live in front of people, but just on my own, I spent 20 minutes and I couldn't find it. So that's a huge advantage. And I think our challenge as leaders in the organization is to make sure that we are continuing to infuse that into the day-to-day. And then again, I think it's also an advantage of that a lot of you, the opportunities to see and hear the impact of the work, you have that advantage, I think, at nonprofits, is that a lot of times that is easier to see. Again, I can usually jump on your website and see that impact statement of how many people that you've served or lives that you've changed or services provided pretty quickly on that. So always bringing that impact back into it. Another area is growth and development. So training and development is the most important. 68% say it's the most important workplace policy, but only 14% of employees would give their companies an A for that. So we want to look at what are we doing to make sure that we are investing in that training and development. So growth and development opportunities are one of the top drivers of employee engagement. And that is not job skills, right? That is actually soft skills that we are looking at. So it's very different than just the job skill development. I think the job skill development is sort of an expectation that people have, but it's really that soft skills development. And you don't have to be in a leadership necessarily position, a formal leadership position, to really invest in that soft skill training. And we know it has a huge return on investment. And then rewards. People want to have rewards and recognition for all of the hard work that they are doing. So you might have some formal rewards, and then you might have informal rewards. And rewards can be different than recognition. Rewards are usually more tangible types of things versus that recognition is not necessarily something that is tangible. But we want to make sure that we don't forget that as a way to acknowledge and appreciate in a genuine way our employees. And so we know that it has a very positive impact. And interesting, 2/3 of employees said that they were twice as likely to leave if they didn't get that feedback. And that's in, and not a very not a very long amount of time, 7 days. So you think about that. How often are you giving recognition to your employees? And we're not just talking about like, hey, thanks for doing a good job. That's not very meaningful. It's, hey, you know what? I heard that conversation that you had with that client today, and I know it was a really big challenge, and you really helped them solve that problem, and you had a very calm and collected approach, and that really demonstrates It's what we're all about. Something really specific and meaningful. And those things last and stick with people. And we want the relationships. Again, key driver, we always fall back to the relationships. And so here's some interesting things to look at. That employees that receive that continuous feedback believe that management's more transparent, that their organization's better at taking action, they feel more valued, their work environment is 12% better, and they're more likely to refer someone. So on that last slide, we talked about that continuous feedback. This is so important that we don't wait to have those conversations with employees. We want to regularly engage them. We don't want to wait until that they have messed up to give them the feedback. We don't want to wait till that one time of year when they get their performance evaluation. We want to have ongoing feedback with them, because no one likes to operate in the dark. And then we know that employers that seek continuous feedback, 15% lower turnover. So that is actively soliciting those opinions of your employees and getting that feedback. So some different ways you can get that information: real-time feedback platforms, stay interviews. So some of you may do exit interviews. Exit interviews are really an autopsy, I say. Right, the damage is done, they're out the door, and we've lost them. Versus a stay interview is a proactive way to engage with employees to say, hey, what is it that you enjoy most about working here? If you won the lottery and you were never coming back, what are the things that you would miss least about working here? And really getting that information to figure out what is it about our employee experience that is working that we need to make sure we continue and grow in, and what is it about that employee experience that we need to change. So that continuous feedback, getting it and giving it and assessing the data that we're getting as well. And then lack of leadership is one of the top challenges that organizations see. And these are things that we want to be doing to look at how are we developing our leaders in an organization, and making sure, again, that we're taking specific dedicated time, because there is a huge gap right now in that leadership area. So making sure that you invest that time. And again, that's more of that soft skills investment that we just talked about, to make sure that we're developing leaders. Performance achievement. We want to make sure that we have the ways to give some of that formal feedback. And again, in this hyperactive environment, great technology to be able to provide real-time, frequent feedback, be interactive with employees so that they're involved in the process, and really easy. Even if you have employees that aren't right in front of you all of the time, they work remote or they work in other states, invest in that technology to be able to have those continuous conversations with your employees. And then the last thing that we want to look at here is, again, what I mentioned earlier, is really focusing on those native drives and strengths that people have. Because if we've gone through the trouble of making sure that we have really gotten the right person in place, right? Not just those skills, but really those native drives and strengths, we've got to keep them. And we know that when we hire that person that is really going to be working in their strength zone, in those native drives that they have, those native needs that they have, that they're more likely to be productive, have better, higher customer satisfaction, and your organization is more likely to have low employee turnover. So again, we want to make sure that with our current employees, that we're also looking at that. So what is it about that employee in that position that allows them? What are those drives that allow them for us to meet their needs and then see that behavior demonstrated in the workplace? And again, we can do it formal ways through people analytics, or you can do it informal just by having those conversations with people. And stay interviews are also a great way to figure out what people's strengths and sort of native drives are. A great question to ask in a stay interview is, hey, when you're going throughout your day, when do you feel the most energy? When do you feel the most focus? What are you doing? Give me some examples. So they might describe like, hey, I was working on this research project and I had a lot of time to really just dig into the details and put a plan together. That's going to tell me something about their strengths, that they really thrive in that type of moment. So how do we give them more of that? So those stay interviews can give you a lot of insights into what those key strengths and drives that they have. Another good question to ask is, what are the things that, when you're going through your day, when do you feel the most drained? What are the things that you avoid doing, or like you save till the very end? Or maybe you do them right at the beginning, get them out of the way so you can be done with it. So that information gives you a lot of insight into these native drives and strengths that we have. And why these things are important is not just for their performance, but as leaders, how we interact with them. So we can say, so for example, I by nature tend to be someone who pretty social. I need that interaction, that collaboration. So if something's on my mind, I'm trying to figure it out, my natural instincts are just to go into someone's office and be like, hey, can we talk about this? I've got some ideas. Can you talk with me? Can we share this? But not everyone is that way. And I have people on my team who are like me, and that's how we connect. But I have other people on my team where I need to send them an email and say, these are the things that I want to talk about. I want to spend 20 minutes on it. When we're done with our meeting, this is what I'd like to have happen, so that they have time to prepare and process. Because if I just barge in and say, hey, let's talk, they're going to be thrown. I'm not going to have a good experience. They're not going to have a good experience. And so though understanding those native drives and strengths has a huge impact on the employee experience that they have. And again, we know that that's so important. So if we look at this, and again, if you want to look at the more formal way, so let's say here's this profile. On the top, we have the profile of what we were looking for and the profile of the person that we hired. We see it's a pretty close match. And through the science, so something like the predictive index helps us go, hey, you know what? As a leader, I need to give them work that involves frequent contact with other people. I need to give them a collaborative environment. I need to have FaceTime with them rather than in email or in writing. So again, that's so important that it builds the relationship, it builds the interaction, it's customized to them and improves their overall employment experience. So if we put this all together, what we want to do is make sure we start before the hire, right? Build that employer brand, get social, get connected, get data and feedback about your hiring process. Look at the strengths and native drives that we have, meaningful work, and relationships. So that is a whirlwind through this today, but I did want to leave time for some questions here at the end. So I know that there are probably some questions that came in. So now would be a good time to let's go through those questions.
Okay, Jenna, we do have a couple. Let me go ahead and read them for you.
Okay.
Mary is talking about, you've probably heard this question before, about not being able to pay as much as they would like to. And she says, consequently, they have high turnover. Do we have any recommendations on changes when we have, a pay problem at an organization where they can't pay? That's what they should be paying.
Yeah, so it pays an interesting one, because usually I find that pay is usually not the problem unless you're so far below the market. So if you're so far below the market on something, pay becomes a primary driver and maybe a reason why people leave. So if you're in a situation where you're well below the market and nothing is going to change that, one of the things that I say, then if you know that and nothing is going to change that, then you have to change your sort of philosophy then. So then we shift our focus to say, okay, we want to train people well enough so that they can leave. We want to treat them well enough so they don't want to. And we really focus on other ways to invest in employees through training and development, through other maybe sort of just recognition, even if it's not rewards, making sure that they are working in their strengths zone. So all of those things can improve engagement and retention and make pay less of a priority for people. The other thing that you have to look at, I have an organization that I worked with, and they say they were in a similar situation. I can't pay at the top of the market, and we're just kind of a training ground. They get some experience here, and then they always leave. And I said, well, if you know that's going to happen, and you know the pay issue isn't going to change, then embrace that and say, you know what? We know this, and so we have to have succession plans because we know people are only going to stay with us for a year or two. So let's come up with sort of a succession plan for those people. We've always got to have someone in the pipeline that we're training into that, and then we know we're going to leave, so we're not caught off guard. And that's kind of what they did. They just kind of embraced it, and they said, we're a great training ground for people. They actually advertised it as that way, to say in these particular positions, a great opportunity for you to get a ton of experience. You're going to have great training, and then you're going to go and you might be a great employee for someone else. And that's fine. So it really kind of depends. I can't totally diagnose it because that pay issue might just be, yep, you're at the bottom of the market and that's why. But if we do a pay assessment or something, maybe we can make some adjustments. Definitely a challenge I hear more of, though, in the nonprofit sector.
Okay, great. Well, that was the only question we had, so you must have covered it really well.
All right. Well, sounds good.
Okay. Well, you will get a copy of the presentation later today, or there will be a video copy attached as well, so you all can pass this around. You see Jenna's contact information there on the screen, so if you need her for anything, you can let her know. And thank you, ma'am, for your time today, and I hope everybody had a good session with us.
You're welcome. Everyone have a great day.
Bye-bye.